also worried about.
A lot of television journalists, I think, and it's true also of print journalists, were unaware of the degree to which their own background, their own upbringing, their own social values were governing the way they approached a story. Also, they were quite often rather superficial in the way they dealt with it. So there was legitimate criticism on those grounds in the 70s. I think the academic criticism actually has helped to improve the performance. The people who are reporting and who are program editors, who are editing, are more aware now than they used to be of the extent to which their own preconceptions and their own bias may affect the way they present the news.
Scotland Yard
And there were changes to presentation in front of the cameras too.
About a car connected with an alleged bomb plot. They believe the car, a beige Fiat 124 saloon, registration number...
Angela Rippon had joined Bob Dougal, Kenneth Kendall and the rest of us, and she quickly became a national figure.
Urged not to go near or touch the car, but to call the police immediately if they spot it. Tonight's appeal comes as a young couple were charged with conspiring to cause explosions following a police raid on a Bayswater flat earlier this week.
Okay, stand by in the studio and stand by...
Concern that newsreaders were becoming show business stars was one reason at least for the change in the pattern of presenting the news that came about towards the end of the 70s.
3, stand by on the scanner.
2, 1...
Go out.
From now on, journalists were to be introduced as readers of the main bulletin.
Take sound, cut cue John.
Men and women who had first-hand experience of television reporting on the road. These were people who were used to handling the next big technological development of the time, the introduction of electronic news gathering, ENG. The point about ENG, with its electronic cameras and portable editing equipment which can feed to landlines and satellites, is that it can provide pictures from almost any part of the world instantly. No processing, no dependence on airline schedules, just plug into the nearest feed point and the pictures can go. What it's done is to make world events much more accessible and also available to a growing number of broadcasting organizations. And it's a trend that's begun to worry government authorities. In the Falklands campaign, this immediacy of coverage, or the possibilities of it, caused the Ministry of Defence a whole set of public relations problems. They dealt with it by simply not making facilities available. It meant that reporting from the Falklands was remarkable for the lack of the kind of action pictures we're used to seeing on film from the 2 world wars and from Vietnam. This kind of control is a development that obviously worries the broadcasters.
I think one of our greatest problems in the future is going to be changing an attitude which I see developing, where authority, whether it is central government, local government, the police, whoever, the civil service, are making some very dangerous assumptions that at a time of crisis or at a time of difficulty, they have the power to tell the broadcaster what to publish, what to broadcast, and what not to publish, what not to broadcast. That, I think, is the most dangerous thing that I can see in the future. I hope desperately that this is only a transitory thing, that the underriding concern in this country is actually to reveal, to disclose, to discuss openly. But I am occasionally quite horrified at what are overt attempts to manage the news. And that's what we have to stand out against at all costs.
Perhaps the greatest example of media management in recent times was the operation surrounding the celebrations in Normandy to mark the D-Day landings. All the main Western news organizations used the latest technology to beam pictures of their respective leaders back to their countries. The French had made available, as a temporary headquarters, an empty school. Equipment was brought in by the ton, and to the irritation of the French in particular, some rearrangements had to be made so that several appealing events could be shown live on the breakfast shows in the States. There's another form of control in the way correspondents, 300 of them in the White House press corps alone are shipped around from facility to facility. Miss the coach, the plane, the meal laid on by the organizers, and you've missed the speech handout and the story.
I didn't realize, are you putting the entire package over? So I must listen to the ins and outs and all that.
The BBC's Washington correspondent Clive Small was with the White House party, into Normandy and out again in less than 12 hours. One of his pieces reflected the current frustration with this kind of news manipulation.
His words were those of a statesman, skillfully attuned to the moment of commemoration, but also carrying a political message for the television screens back home. Ronald Reagan as world leader, bestriding the news bulletins and overshadowing his Democratic Party rivals and their contest in the primary.
Some 3,000 media representatives were on hand to record the D-Day anniversary events. Among them was a correspondent whose picture we saw on the Normandy beaches 40 years ago, Frank Gillard. Back at his old haunts at Arromanches, he was reminiscing about the D-Day events, and he also had some thoughts about the change he'd seen in the tools of our trade and the effects that might have on the next 30 years of BBC television news.
We now have a gigantic new power in our lives which conveys tremendous influence. That influence can be for good or it can be for ill. And governments and other bodies with ideological intentions naturally will seek to control it in order to control the minds of all those who view television or listen to radio. Indeed, it's a fact that in, I believe, more than half the countries of this world, the broadcasting services, television and radio, are actually controlled by the government and are virtually the voice of the government. And what we have to fight for in the years to come is to preserve the integrity of our broadcasting systems and their independence so that they can convey the truth to people and let people make up their own minds on all the issues of the day which have a great bearing on their lives and how the world is going to proceed.
Right, the 9 tonight. Should we write D-Day stroke Trudeau there as a separate BT? That's nice.
Can you do that with the photographs? Yeah. And then there's a little white there.
Lovely. If you're happy that the camera can move on that.
Whether you use a crackly disc or whether, because it's news, you prefer to use today's sound of Vera from Normandy Live this
And we
morning.
could then cut to these images. I think we should hear from our man there. I think we should hear from Marconi. So we'll go a map in the intro. We're getting some News pictures this afternoon. Gary Hewitt, CBC report. And we just hope it all comes together. There's a feed of 2 hours this evening. The idea is it comes together in 3 separate packages that we edit here, and we end up with one package by 9 o'clock.
Yeah, with Phil's links on the front of each reporter package.
Can I tell you about the end of the programme?
Yeah.
Vera.
2 people here have been suggesting that we should get Vera Lynn up from breakfast time.